I'm really just in disbelief. Can you imagine your son being in a secure treatment facility and being sexually assaulted and taken advantage of? Can you imagine someone your own age having a relationship with your son at his young age right now and having a baby? It's just a nightmare, and it's became my reality.
Hello, this is JDF, and we have Mr. Ishan Beard.
He was the
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to ask that the victim, young man, that the camera remain off. And once the mother is done making her statement, I will ask if he wants to make a statement. Please refrain from using the victim's full name here on the record, whoever just said that. Thank you. Ms. Rios, if you'd like to continue, I'm sorry about that interruption.
No problem. He was the youngest child at the Shawano Center trying to rehabilitate and work on his own issues. Instead, he was focused on you. You manipulated my son. You preyed on him. You were in a position of power that wasn't supposed to happen. You were trusted with all of these children to keep them safe and help them through the program. This is going to affect my son for his entire life. He doesn't think that he's a victim because he's a teenager that just got to sleep with a grown woman while he's locked up. A lot of people don't view it as bad as it really is because he's a boy and she's a girl. But the fact of the matter is, he was and still is a child. I don't know what to say now that DNA was established, because I really had a whole different message for you. But I don't want to sabotage any relationship with that child. And Sean wants to be in that baby's life. But you're really selfish.
All right, thank you. Ms. Rios, was there anything else that you wanted to say today?
No.
Okay, to the facility where the victim is, if you can unmute, please. All right. Do we have the victim EB present? I'm using the initials EB. All right. Young man, is there anything that you want to say here to the court for the sentencing hearing today?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you. Ms. Koch, anything on behalf of the people for allocution?
Now, the court has read through the PSI, is aware of all the facts and circumstances of this case. Obviously, we've talked about the fact that the DNA did come back on Friday and confirmed that this, I think he's 17 now, year old, is the father of Miss Palmer's baby. I'm not a paternity expert and she is legally married, so I don't know what will happen legally with that situation. But we now have this recommendation. The guidelines are 29 to 57. Frankly, I think Miss Palmer's behavior is pretty egregious. When I read through it, all of the behavior that went up to this and all the things she did, all the going to the room, the faking the accidents, everything that happened to get access to this young child. I know he does not think he is the victim. I know that by the time anybody admits sexual intercourse happened, he was of the age of consent. But this is just a terrible circumstance. Shawano is a secured facility. We're supposed to be able to send youth there. You know, he had a pretty violent history. I've dealt with this victim on several occasions since he's been at Shawano, so I'm pretty familiar with him. This is just a terrible situation. I'm not sure how this could happen in that type of facility. There's cameras all over the place. They clearly had to work to make this happen. And I think that the court should sentence her on the very high end of the guidelines in this circumstance. I couldn't charge CSC 1 because it didn't meet the criteria. I tried everything to find a way to get around the different criteria. It's a juvenile justice facility. owned by DHS, and that designation changes a lot of things. But everything that I came up with was he was over the age of 16, which is part of the elements for CSC 1. So I charged her, she pled, she took responsibility early, and I'd ask the court to sentence her on the high end. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Palmer, if you come back up to the podium. Mr. Williams, anything on behalf of Ms. Palmer?
Just a couple of things, Your Honor. The email was sent with the psychological. It did get sent to the prosecutor's office. It kept bouncing back as someone was out of office. I would like the court to consider that evaluation. It's a psychological evaluation done by professional psychological services in Grand Rapids. And really, it echoes the PSI that she's very low recidivism. I mean, very low. I think we'd be remiss to think that this kid is completely innocent. I think it's actually, frankly, absurd. He staged the problems. She had nothing to do with it. There's nothing in this record, on film, anything, anywhere in this record to say they were in cahoots with each other to stage this. He preyed on her. He knew her routine. She spent the first part of her life in law enforcement as a female police officer in a super male-dominated, ego-driven type mentality / environment, which was traumatic to her, gave her very low self-esteem per her psychological evaluation, made her really question herself as a person, and felt at a low point. She didn't have anywhere else to work, any other skills, so she got a job at this correction facility. And this person planned these things to happen with her. And the first time it occurred, she didn't fight it. It happened, and it happened, and she didn't know how to accept it. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know she should report this. She didn't know what to do. And then it happened again. And in between the first time it happened and the second time it happened, she anguished over it. She has 2 other children. She had a husband. She had no one to talk to. She felt weak. She felt inferior. And that's her story. Frankly, he's 16 years old. He's old enough to consent. He's old enough to be violent enough to physically harm people or kill someone. He's old enough to be incarcerated like an adult, and he's old enough to be incarcerated in a prison here at some point. But he's not an innocent child. He's a young man who's certainly a kid. I completely agree with everything his mother said. As a parent, I agree with her 100%. But in reality, she's not a predator. She's a tiny little person who has super low self-esteem, who barely has a cognitive ability to function, and has very poor decision-making skills. So, and she spent her life dedicating it to law enforcement and to the community and as being a corrections officer. So she made a huge mistake, but she also has 3 kids now. They have a family member here who wants, thank you, 2 kids now. A mom who has the foresight, a grandmother has the foresight that realizes that they need to patch this back together. I'm going to ask the court, and the young man did put in his written statement that he was the mastermind behind this, that he is in counseling, but it's not for this, it's for other reasons. So I'm asking the court to do a downward departure, place her in prison.
Well, that took a turn. This sentencing hearing in front of Judge George Mertz was one of those difficult sessions that walk the razor-thin line between legality, morality, and deeply personal pain. Right off the bat, Judge Mertz maintained control with a calm, deliberate hand. His presence didn't command the room through force, but rather by setting a respectful tone, one that allowed all voices to be heard in what was clearly an emotionally fraught case. The central issue revolved around Miss Palmer, a staff member at a juvenile treatment facility, and a 17-year-old youth EB who is now confirmed via DNA to be the father of her child. From the outset, the victim's mother, Miss Rios, delivered a powerful, heartfelt statement. She didn't yell or point fingers irrationally, but she didn't hold back either. Her words painted a devastating picture of betrayal, not just by an individual, but by a system that was supposed to protect her son while he worked on himself. The strength of her voice was matched only by her restraint, especially when she acknowledged the complexity of her son's potential relationship with the baby. Her message was emotional but grounded in concern, disappointment, and a gut-wrenching dose of reality. EB himself chose not to speak, and the court respected that without pressure. The prosecution, represented by Miss Koch, laid out a clear and thorough summary. She noted the institutional failures, the calculated nature of the defendant's actions, and the legal barriers that limited how the charges could be filed. Her delivery was professional, but you could sense the frustration just below the surface, particularly in how she described the manipulation and deception that allowed the conduct to occur in what should have been a tightly controlled facility. Her recommendation for a high-end sentence was justified by both the facts and the disturbing pattern of behavior. Defense attorney Mr. Williams, on the other hand, went in hard on a narrative that painted Miss Palmer as a vulnerable woman with low self-esteem, limited cognitive functioning, and a background of trauma stemming from her time in law enforcement. It was a bold move, framing the youth as the manipulator and Palmer as the one preyed on, and one that many observers might find controversial. His request for a downward departure leaned heavily on psychological evaluations and the assertion that the youth was not as innocent as he seemed. It was a risky pivot, and whether it resonated with the court or not, it certainly added complexity to the hearing. The atmosphere was tense but never unruly. No shouting matches, no legal fireworks, just the kind of subdued intensity that comes with a courtroom trying to wrestle justice out of a morally gray space. In the end, every participant seemed to understand the stakes, and Judge Mertz gave everyone their say, and that, in the courtroom, is all you can ask for. If you found this hearing insightful, consider subscribing, hitting the bell, and letting me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read everyone.